Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at something truly essential: oxygen. Yeah, you heard right, oxygen.
It might seem pretty basic, but we're
Right.
going to uncover some surprising facts
Yeah.
and uses that go way beyond breathing.
That's really cool. And to guide us, we've got excerpts from a chemistry textbook called Pioneer Chemistry.
A class.
And we'll be focusing on chapters about nonmetals and their compounds, specifically oxides. So get ready to learn about how oxygen can be both life-giving and explosive,
Yeah.
and how it plays a vital role in everything from treating medical conditions to actually purifying sewage.
We'll start with something called allotropes.
Heliotrope.
Allotropes. So you remember isotopes, those atoms of the same element, but with different numbers of neutrons?
Yeah.
Well, allotropes are like their structural cousins,
Hmm.
different forms of the same element, but with very distinct arrangements of atoms.
Okay, so like diamonds and graphite. They're both made of carbon, but
Exactly.
totally different.
Yeah, exactly. And oxygen has some pretty fascinating allotropes, too. Of course, there's the dioxygen we breathe, O2,
Right.
but then there's ozone, O3, up in the stratosphere.
Ozone, the one that
Yeah.
protects us from that
Yeah.
harmful UV radiation.
Yeah.
But ozone is also a pollutant, right?
Right. It all comes down to location. High up, ozone is our shield.
Okay.
But down here, it's actually a harmful pollutant formed from reactions with stuff like car exhaust.
So good ozone, bad ozone.
Yeah.
Location, location, location.
Yeah.
But what makes these two forms of oxygen so different?
Well, it all boils down to their structure. Dioxygen has 2 oxygen atoms double bonded,
Okay.
while ozone has 3 oxygen atoms kind of in this bent shape.
So ozone is less stable than oxygen.
Exactly. And that difference in bonding affects their reactivity too.
Well, I read that oxygen is colorless, while ozone is a pale blue gas.
And it's not just color. Ozone is a much more powerful oxidizing agent. It's really good at breaking down other molecules.
Oh, so that explains why it's used to sterilize water and bleach things.
Precisely. Ozone is a chemical powerhouse, perfect for those applications.
And then we have good old oxygen keeping us alive with every breath.
Exactly.
Okay, so different forms, different uses. It's like oxygen is wearing all these different hats.
I like that.
Well, let's move on to another fascinating aspect: oxides. These are compounds that are formed when oxygen combines with other elements.
Oxygen loves to partner up. And those partnerships create this incredibly diverse dance floor of compounds.
Okay, I'm picturing this chemical ballroom with oxygen as the star, ready to waltz with any element that comes along.
I love it.
But this being chemistry, I'm sure there are rules to this dance, right?
Of course. Oxides are classified based on how they behave with acids and bases.
Okay, so acidic oxides,
Mhm.
basic oxides, what else?
Well, we also have amphoteric oxides, the ones that can swing both ways, reacting with both acids and bases.
Okay.
And then there are neutral oxides, which don't have a strong preference for either.
Oxygen really knows how to mix it up. Can we get some examples to illustrate this?
Absolutely. Think of sulfur dioxide, SO2. It's an acidic oxide that forms sulfurous acid, H2SO3, when it reacts with water.
And that's the stuff that contributes to acid rain.
Right. Unfortunately, yes. But on the flip side, we have basic oxides like calcium oxide, CaO. It reacts with water to form calcium hydroxide, KOH2.
And that's used in agriculture to neutralize acidic soils.
Exactly. So you see, oxygen's chemistry isn't just textbook stuff. It has real-world consequences.
It's incredible how one element can be behind both environmental problems and solutions. What about those amphoteric oxides, the ones that can react with both acids and bases?
Aluminum oxide, Al2O3, is a great example.
Okay.
It's incredibly versatile, used in everything from water treatment to making high-temperature ceramics. We also have zinc oxide, ZNO, which you might find in sunscreen because it absorbs UV radiation.
Wow. So this one element can create such a range of compounds with totally different properties and uses.
And we're just getting started. There's a whole family of oxides to explore, each with its own unique characteristics and behaviors.
Okay, this is fascinating. Can we talk more about this family of oxides?
Absolutely. We can categorize them further based on their structures. We have normal oxides,
Okay.
the most common type, which follow the typical rules of chemical bonding. Then there are peroxides, which contain a special oxygen bond.
Like hydrogen peroxide, the stuff we use to clean cut.
Precisely. Hydrogen peroxide, or H2O2, is a classic peroxide. It's a powerful oxidizing agent, which makes it great for disinfecting, bleaching. Speaking of hydrogen peroxide, did you know it belongs to this special family of oxides called peroxides? They have this unique oxygen bond, but we can talk more about that later.
Wait. Before we move on, I have to ask, I remember my grandma used to use hydrogen peroxide to bleach her hair. Does that still happen?
It does. It's still a common ingredient in hair dyes and bleaches. And speaking of interesting uses, did you know that hydrogen peroxide is actually what makes glow sticks glow?
No way.
Yeah.
Really?
It's another example of chemistry in action. Inside a glow stick, there's a compartment with hydrogen peroxide. When you snap the stick, you break a seal, allowing the hydrogen peroxide to mix with other chemicals, including a fluorescent dye. And this reaction releases energy in the form of light, creating that cool glow stick effect.
That's completely new to me. I never thought about hydrogen peroxide being used that way. It really is a multi-purpose marvel.
It certainly has a diverse resume. And we haven't even touched on its industrial applications. Remember, we were talking about how oxygen is used in sewage treatment? Well, hydrogen peroxide is often used alongside oxygen in this process.
So it's like a dynamic duo working
Yeah.
together to clean our water. But let's get back to the family of oxides. You mentioned normal oxides and peroxides. What other types are there?
We also have superoxides. They have even more oxygen than peroxides and are extremely reactive. They're not as common, but they have some intriguing applications. For instance, potassium superoxide, KO2, is used in breathing apparatus in submarines because it can absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen.
Wow, so they're like oxygen generators. Okay, so we've got normal oxides, peroxides, and superoxides. What else?
We also have mixed oxides, which contain multiple metal ions. These showcase oxygen's amazing ability to bond in diverse ways and have applications in electronics, catalysis, and even as pigments. And finally, we have suboxides, which have a lower oxygen content compared to normal oxides. They're not as common, but they still play a role in certain chemical reactions and materials.
Wow, there's a whole extended family of oxygen compounds, each with its own structure, properties, and uses. It's amazing how much variety we can get from a single element.
It really highlights the incredible diversity of the chemical world, and this is just the beginning of our deep dive into oxygen.
I'm already hooked. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's bring it back to the basics. We've talked about different forms of oxygen and its compounds, but let's zoom in on the most fundamental role of oxygen: powering life itself. We all know we need it to breathe, but what's actually happening at the cellular level?
That's the key question. At its core, breathing is about energy production. Our cells use oxygen to break down glucose, a simple sugar, in a process called cellular respiration. What analogy would you use to explain how oxygen is used in our cells?
That's a good question. I guess I'd say our cells are like tiny factories,
Okay,
constantly working to produce the energy we need.
that's a great start. And oxygen is a crucial part of that process. It acts as the final destination in this electron relay race, ensuring a smooth and controlled energy transfer.
Electron relay race.
That's a simplified way to describe the electron transport chain, a series of protein complexes embedded in the mitochondria, the powerhouses of our cells.
Yeah.
So during cellular respiration, electrons are passed from molecule to molecule, releasing energy along the way.
Okay, so oxygen is kind of like the finish line of this race.
Exactly. Without oxygen, this process would come to a screeching halt, and our cells wouldn't be able to produce the energy they need.
That's why we can't hold our breath for too long. Our cells need a constant supply of oxygen to keep those energy factories running.
Precisely. And it's not just humans. All animals that breathe air rely on oxygen for this process.
What about plants? They produce oxygen through photosynthesis, but do they also need it?
Yes, plants need oxygen for cellular respiration too. They produce their own oxygen through photosynthesis, but they also need to consume some of it to generate energy for growth and other processes.
So plants are both oxygen producers and oxygen consumers. That's fascinating. It really shows how interconnected everything is. We often think of plants and animals as separate, but we're all part of this intricate web of life, all dependent on oxygen for survival.
Exactly. And this brings us to an important point. We need to consider the challenges facing oxygen in our modern world. Things like pollution and deforestation are these impacting oxygen levels.
That's a crucial question. While the overall levels of oxygen in the atmosphere are still relatively stable, I've read that there are concerns about localized decreases in oxygen levels, particularly in areas with high pollution or deforestation.
That's right. Air pollution, mainly from burning fossil fuels, releases harmful gases that can deplete oxygen and contribute to respiratory problems in humans and other animals.
And what about deforestation?
Trees are our planet's natural oxygen factories. When we lose forests, we not only lose those oxygen producers, but we also release massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This further contributes to the imbalance and can lead to localized decreases in oxygen levels.
It's a sobering reminder that our actions have consequences for the delicate balance of our planet's atmosphere. So even though global oxygen levels are stable, what can we do to minimize our impact and support a healthy oxygen balance?
That's a great question, and one that we should all be asking ourselves.
This has been an incredible start to our deep dive into oxygen. We've learned so much about its different forms, its fascinating reactions, and its vital role in supporting life and shaping our planet.
And we're just getting started. There's still so much more to explore in the fascinating world of oxygen.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into the wonders of this essential element. Welcome back to our oxygen adventure. Last time we were exploring all the different forms of oxygen, from the life-giving O2 we breathe to the reactive ozone up in the atmosphere.
Right.
And we even started to talk about the amazing world of oxides and their fascinating chemistry.
And today, we're going to uncover even more secrets of this essential element.
Okay.
Starting with something we briefly touched on, hydrogen peroxide.
Yes. I'm really curious to learn more about this multi-purpose marvel. We talk about how it's a powerful oxidizing agent, but how does that actually translate into everyday uses?
Well, that oxidizing power is precisely what makes it so versatile.
Oh,
Remember, oxidizing means it's really good at breaking down other molecules.
right, like a tiny wrecking ball breaking apart those chemical bonds.
That's a great analogy, and that's why hydrogen peroxide is so effective for bleaching, stain removal, and of course, killing bacteria.
So when we clean a cut with hydrogen peroxide, it's not just cleaning the wound, it's actually destroying the germs that could cause an infection.
Exactly. And its germ-fighting power isn't limited to humans. Hydrogen peroxide is also used in agriculture to disinfect soil and prevent plant diseases.
Wow, so many uses.
Oh.
And speaking of its cleaning power, I remember my grandma used to use hydrogen peroxide to bleach her hair. Does that still happen?
Absolutely. It's still a common ingredient in hair dyes and bleaches.
Okay.
And speaking of breaking things down, remember we were talking about how oxygen is used in sewage treatment? Well, hydrogen peroxide is often used alongside oxygen in this process.
It's like a dynamic duo working together to clean our water.
Precisely. Hydrogen peroxide helps break down organic matter in wastewater, making the treatment process more efficient.
It seems like hydrogen peroxide is a chemical superhero, tackling everything from disinfecting wounds to cleaning up our water. What other surprises does it have in store for us?
Well, how about this? It's used in mining.
Mining. I never would guess that. How does hydrogen peroxide fit into that world?
It's used to extract precious metals like gold and uranium. Remember that powerful oxidizing ability we've been talking about?
Right.
That comes in handy here too.
So it helps to dissolve and separate those metals from the surrounding rock.
Exactly. And here's another surprise. Hydrogen peroxide is actually being explored as a potential fuel source in fuel cell technology.
Fuel cells. That's something we're hearing more and more about as a clean energy solution.
Right. Fuel cells are devices that convert chemical energy into electrical energy.
Okay.
And in certain types of fuel cells, hydrogen peroxide can be used as the fuel.
So it's like a battery, but with hydrogen peroxide as the power source. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. But doesn't the production of hydrogen peroxide for all of these applications, doesn't that have its own environmental impact?
That's a great point. Like any industrial process, the production of hydrogen peroxide does have environmental considerations. However, research is ongoing to develop more sustainable methods of production, including using renewable energy sources and minimizing waste.
That's good to know. It sounds like hydrogen peroxide has a bright future, but we need to be mindful of its environmental footprint as we explore its potential.
Absolutely. Sustainability is key. Now, speaking of oxygen's vital role, let's shift gears a bit and talk about its importance in supporting life on Earth. We know we need it to breathe, but I'm curious what's actually happening at the cellular level.
Yes, let's dive into the microscopic world of our cells.
At its core, breathing is all about energy production. Our cells need oxygen to break down glucose,
Okay.
a simple sugar, in a process called cellular respiration.
So it's like our cells are these tiny factories constantly working to produce the energy we need to function.
That's a great analogy. And oxygen is a critical component of that energy production line. It acts as the final electron acceptor in the electron transport chain, a complex series of reactions that occur within our cells' mitochondria.
Electron transport chain. That sounds complicated.
It is a complex process, but in simple terms, it's like a relay race where electrons are passed from one molecule to another, releasing energy along the way.
Okay, so what's oxygen's role in this relay race?
Oxygen is waiting at the finish line.
Okay.
ready to grab those electrons and combine with hydrogen ions to form water.
So oxygen is essential for completing this energy-generating process.
Exactly. Without oxygen, the electron transport chain would come to a grinding halt, and our cells wouldn't be able to produce the energy they need to survive.
That's why we can't hold our breath for too long. Our cells need that constant supply of oxygen to keep the energy flowing.
Precisely. And it's not just humans. All animals that breathe air rely on oxygen for cellular respiration.
What about plants? I know they produce oxygen through photosynthesis, but do they also need it for cellular respiration?
Yes, they do. While plants generate their own oxygen through photosynthesis, they also need to consume some of it for cellular respiration, especially at night when there's no sunlight for photosynthesis.
So it's a two-way street. Plants are both producers and consumers of oxygen.
It's a beautiful balance, and it highlights how interconnected all living things are.
Yeah,
We often think of plants and animals as separate, but we're all part of this intricate web of life, all dependent on oxygen.
that's a great point. But before we get too philosophical, let's shift gears and talk about something a bit more dazzling. Chemiluminescence.
Ah, yes, chemiluminescence, the emission of light as a result of a chemical reaction.
Right.
It's a fascinating phenomenon, and oxygen often plays a starring role.
It's like nature's own light show. You mentioned earlier that hydrogen peroxide is involved in the glow of glow sticks. Is that an example of chemiluminescence?
You got it. The reaction of hydrogen peroxide with the fluorescent dye inside the glow stick releases energy in the form of light, creating that cool glow.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
But what about other examples of chemiluminescence in nature? I'm thinking of fireflies, those magical twinkling insects. How do they create their light?
Fireflies have a special organ called a lantern that contains a compound called luciferin.
Okay.
When luciferin reacts with oxygen, with the help of an enzyme called luciferase, it produces light.
Wow, it's like fireflies have their own built-in chemistry set for creating light.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I remember as a kid trying to catch fireflies in jars to make my own lantern.
Yeah.
It never quite worked as well.
That's a cherished childhood memory for many of us.
Yeah,
And it's a great example of how chemiluminescence sparks wonder and curiosity.
it does. Are there other examples of chemiluminescence in nature?
Many deep-sea creatures, like anglerfish and jellyfish, also use chemiluminescence.
Oh, wow.
They use it to attract prey, communicate, or even defend themselves in the dark depths of the ocean.
That's amazing. It's like a dazzling underwater light show, all thanks to oxygen and some clever chemistry.
Nature is full of surprises. And speaking of underwater, did you know that the amount of oxygen dissolved in water is crucial for aquatic life?
Well, fish need oxygen to breathe right, just like we need oxygen in the air.
Exactly. Fish use their gills to extract dissolved oxygen from the water.
Right.
But the concentration of dissolved oxygen can vary depending on factors like temperature, water flow, and pollution.
So if there's not enough dissolved oxygen in the water, it can be harmful to fish and other aquatic organisms.
Absolutely. Low dissolved oxygen levels, often caused by pollution or algal blooms, can lead to fish kills and disrupt entire aquatic ecosystems. It's a reminder that oxygen is essential not just for life on land, but for life in our oceans and rivers as well.
This has been such a fascinating exploration of the many roles oxygen plays in our world.
Mm.
It's clear that oxygen is much more than just the air we breathe.
Indeed. And we still have more to uncover.
Well, then let's keep going. Join us for the final part of our Oxygen Odyssey, where we'll delve into even more intriguing aspects of this remarkable element. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
We've been on quite a journey exploring the amazing world of oxygen,
Yeah.
from its different forms and those fascinating reactions to its vital role in supporting life on Earth. We even took a detour into chemiluminescence.
It's been quite a ride.
It has. I'm ready for more oxygen revelations. What do we have in store today?
Well, let's start with a question. We've talked about how oxygen is crucial for aquatic life.
Right.
But have you ever considered the connection between oxygen and the Earth's climate?
That's an interesting question. I know oxygen is a key part of the air we breathe, but I haven't really thought about how it impacts the climate.
Well, oxygen plays a vital role in regulating our planet's temperature. It's a major absorber of ultraviolet radiation from the sun.
So oxygen acts like a natural sunscreen for the Earth.
Exactly. By absorbing UV radiation, oxygen helps to protect life on Earth from harmful rays and also plays a role in regulating atmospheric temperature.
That's incredible. I never realized oxygen had such a global impact.
And there's more. Oxygen also plays a role in the formation of ozone in the stratosphere,
Right.
which, as we discussed earlier, provides an additional layer of protection from UV radiation.
It's amazing how this one element, oxygen, is involved in so many crucial processes that make life on Earth possible. It's like a silent guardian, protecting us from the sun's harmful rays and helping regulate our climate.
It's a testament to the interconnectedness of our planet's systems. Everything is linked, and oxygen is a key player in that intricate web.
I'm starting to see oxygen in a whole new light. It's not just about breathing, it's about the very fabric of life on Earth.
And as we've seen throughout our deep dive, its chemistry is incredibly diverse, with applications ranging from medicine and industry to environmental science.
It's been an incredible journey exploring this multifaceted world of oxygen. We've learned so much about its different forms, its fascinating reactions, and its vital role in supporting life and shaping our planet.
And the takeaway: oxygen is much more than just the air we breathe. It's a fundamental element that touches nearly every aspect of our lives, from the everyday to the extraordinary.
So the next time you take a breath, remember all the amazing things oxygen is doing both inside your body and in the world around you.
And remember, there's always more to discover. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop being curious about the world around you.
Well said. That's it for our deep dive into the fascinating world of oxygen. We hope you enjoyed the journey as much as we did. Until next time, stay curious.